What happens when one of the most talked about women in the world walks onto a late night set thinking she can say anything she wants, only to find out that this host doesn't play by royal rules? In just 32 seconds of heated exchange, a guest goes from composed to completely unhinged, and what follows is one of the most shocking exits in television history. The studio lights are hot, the audience is packed in tight, ready for another night of sharp commentary and no-holds-barred conversation. Bill Maher sits behind his desk with that familiar smirk, the one that says he's ready for anything, and tonight, he's going to need it. Meghan walks out to polite applause. She's wearing an expensive-looking outfit, perfectly tailored, hair styled to perfection. She sits down across from Bill, crosses her legs, and flashes a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. There's tension in the air already, and the show hasn't even really started. Bill leans forward, friendly enough, and opens with a simple question. So, thanks for coming on. I've got to ask, you've been pretty vocal about a lot of issues lately. What made you want to come on the show tonight? Meghan doesn't miss a beat. Well, I think it's important to have conversations with people who might not always agree with you. That's what real dialogue is about. Sounds reasonable, right? But there's something in her tone, something that suggests she's already got her guard up, already ready for a fight. Bill nods, still keeping it light. Sure. So let's dive in. You've talked a lot about privacy, about wanting to step away from the spotlight. But you're also doing interviews, podcasts. You're everywhere. How do you square that? The audience murmurs a little. It's a fair question, the kind of thing everyone's been thinking. Meghan's smile tightens. I think there's a difference between being hounded by tabloids and choosing when and how to share your story, she says, her voice getting a little sharper. I don't think you understand what it's like to have your privacy violated constantly. Bill raises an eyebrow. I mean, I'm on television every week. I get it. But I also don't hold press conferences to complain about the attention. The audience laughs. It's not mean-spirited, just truthful. But Meghan doesn't laugh. Her expression hardens. That's not the same thing at all, she says, leaning forward. You chose this life. I was thrown into it. You married into one of the most famous families on the planet, Bill counters, keeping his tone measured. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not exactly a surprise that people were interested. Meghan's jaw clenches. You're simplifying something incredibly complex. Maybe, Bill says with a shrug. Or maybe it's just not as complicated as you're making it. There's a pause. You can feel the temperature in the room rising. The audience is silent now, watching this unfold like a tennis match. Bill moves on, trying to keep things rolling. All right, let's talk about something else. You've spoken about wanting to make a difference, wanting to use your platform for good. What does that look like for you? Meghan sits back, seems to relax a fraction. I think it's about amplifying voices that aren't heard. It's about using whatever influence I have to create change. Okay, Bill says, but here's what I don't get. You talk about amplifying other voices, but a lot of the time, it feels like it's just your voice getting amplified. Where are these other people you're supposedly helping? The audience reacts again, some laughter, some awkward shifting. Meghan's face flushes. That's incredibly dismissive, she says, her voice rising. I've worked with numerous organizations. I've highlighted countless stories. I'm sure you have, Bill says, not backing down. But when I Google your name, I see your face, your interviews, your projects. I don't see a lot of other people getting the spotlight. Meghan's hands grip the armrests of her chair. Maybe that says more about the media than it does about me. Or maybe it says that you like being the center of attention more than you let on. Bill replies smoothly. The room goes completely quiet. That one landed hard. Meghan stares at him, her eyes flashing with anger. You don't know anything about me. I know what you put out there, Bill says. And what you put out there is a lot of talk about being a victim, while simultaneously courting the very attention you claim to hate. I never said I was a victim, Meghan snaps. Bill tilts his head. Really? Because that's kind of been the whole narrative. Meghan stands up suddenly, and the audience gasps. She's visibly shaking now, her composure completely gone. This is exactly what I'm talking about, she says, her voice loud and sharp. This is the kind of treatment I've had to endure. You sit there in your comfortable little bubble, making jokes, and you have no idea what. It's like to be constantly attacked, constantly misunderstood. Bill stays seated, calm. I'm not attacking you. I'm asking you questions. That's what happens on a talk show. These aren't questions, Meghan fires back. This is an ambush. This is you trying to make me look bad for your audience. I'm not trying to make you look any way, Bill says evenly. You're doing that all on your own. The audience reacts with a mix of gasps and nervous laughter. Meghan's face is red now, her breathing quick. You know what? She says, pointing at Bill. You're exactly the kind of person who perpetuates the problem. You sit here with your smug attitude thinking you're so clever, but really you're just another bully with a microphone. Bill leans back in his chair, still completely calm. I'm a bully for asking you to back up your statements? You're twisting everything I say, Meghan shouts. I'm literally just responding to what you're saying, Bill replies. Meghan looks around, wildly, like she's searching for support, but the audience is just watching, stunned. She turns back to Bill. I came here thinking we could have an intelligent conversation, she says, her voice shaking. But clearly, that's not what you want. I do want that, Bill says. But you're not answering the questions. You're just getting defensive. Because your questions are designed to trap me, Meghan exclaims. Bill shakes his head. No, they're designed to get honest answers. If you feel trapped by honesty, that's a different issue. Meghan takes a step toward the desk, her finger still pointing. Don't you dare talk to me about honesty. You don't know the first thing about my life, about what I've been through. Then tell me, Bill says, spreading his hands. That's why you're here, right? To tell your story? So tell it, but tell it straight, without all the contradictions. Meghan's mouth opens and closes. She's searching for words, but they're not coming. She looks furious and lost at the same time. I don't have to justify myself to you, she finally says. You don't, Bill agrees. But you came on the show. You knew what this was. You can't walk onto a political comedy show and expect softballs. This isn't comedy, Meghan hisses. This is cruelty. No, Bill says firmly. Cruelty is expecting everyone to feel sorry for you while you live in a mansion and complain about your problems on a streaming deal worth millions. There are people out there with real problems, real struggles, and they're not getting book deals to talk about it. Meghan's face contorts with rage. How dare you? You have no right to minimize what I've experienced. I'm not minimizing it, Bill says. I'm putting it in perspective. Your perspective is worthless, Meghan spits out. The audience gasps again, louder this time. That was a direct insult, no hiding it. Bill's expression doesn't change. Well, that's your opinion, but you're on my show, and if you don't like the conversation, you know where the door is. Meghan stares at him, breathing hard. For a moment, it seems like she might sit back down, might try to salvage this, but then her face twists into something uglier. You're a small, bitter man, she says slowly, deliberately, and this show is a platform for your own insecurities. You attack people because it makes you feel powerful, but you're not powerful. You're pathetic. The studio goes dead silent. Even the crew members are frozen, watching this meltdown happen in real time. Bill stands up now, his expression serious. Okay, we're done here. No, Meghan says, her voice rising to a near shout. I'm not done. You brought me here to humiliate me, and now you're throwing me out because I'm fighting back? I brought you here to have a conversation, Bill says, his voice firm but controlled. You're the one who turned it into a tantrum. A tantrum? Meghan's voice cracks. You think this is a tantrum? This is me standing up for myself. This is me refusing to be bullied by someone like you. Someone like me? Bill repeats. And what's that exactly? Meghan's eyes are wild now. Someone who thinks they're better than everyone else. Someone who hides behind comedy so they can say whatever cruel thing pops into their head. I'm not hiding behind anything, Bill says. I say what I think. That's the whole point of the show. If you can't handle that, you shouldn't have come. I can handle it, Meghan insists, her voice shaking. What I can't handle is being disrespected like this. Disrespected? Bill looks genuinely confused. I asked you questions. Tough questions, sure, but that's not disrespect. Disrespect is coming on someone's show and calling them pathetic. Meghan's hands are trembling. You pushed me to this. No, Bill says flatly. You did this yourself. You came in here with an attitude, and when you didn't get the fawning interview you expected, you lost it. That's not true, Meghan says, but her voice is weak now, like she knows she's losing. Bill gestures to the audience. Everyone here just watched it happen. You can't rewrite this in real time. Meghan looks around again, and this time there's panic in her eyes. She realizes how this looks, how she's coming across. But instead of backing down, she doubles down. "This is typical," she says, her voice bitter. "This is what happens when you speak truth to power. You get torn down." Bill laughs, a short, sharp sound. "Truth to power? I'm a talk show host, not the government. And you're not speaking truth, you're speaking nonsense." "I'm done with this," Meghan announces, as if she's making some grand statement. "Yeah, you said that already," Bill replies. "The door's still over there." Meghan grabs her purse from beside the chair, her movements jerky and aggressive. "You're going to regret this." Bill shrugs. "I doubt it." "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Meghan says. And there's something almost threatening in her tone. "I'm dealing with someone who can't handle a simple interview," Bill says. "That's pretty clear." Meghan opens her mouth like she's going to say something else, something cutting, but nothing comes out. She's run out of ammunition. She spins on her heel and starts walking toward the exit, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. The audience doesn't know what to do. There's some scattered, uncomfortable applause, but mostly just stunned silence. Bill watches her go, then turns back to the camera. "Well, that went well." The audience laughs, a release of all the tension that's been building. It's nervous laughter, but it's real. Meghan stops at the edge of the stage, turns back one more time. "This isn't over." Bill waves. "Yes, it is. Goodbye." And with that, she's gone. Disappeared backstage, leaving behind an audience full of people who just witnessed one of the most uncomfortable television moments in recent memory. Bill sits back down at his desk, straightens his papers, and looks directly into the camera. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what happens when someone mistakes their own importance for actual importance. The audience erupts in applause now, real and sustained. They're on his side. They saw what happened. They watched someone come on the show expecting to be treated with kid gloves, and when they weren't, they couldn't handle it. Bill continues, his voice steady. "Look, I'm all for having difficult conversations. That's what we do here. But you've got to be willing to actually have the conversation. You can't just expect everyone to agree with you and pat you on the back. That's not how the real world works." More applause. The audience is eating this up. And here's the thing. Bill goes on. "When you live your life in the public eye by choice, when you do interview after interview, when you write books and make deals and put yourself out there, you don't get to complain when people have opinions about it. You don't get to cry victim when someone asks you a tough question. The camera stays on him, and he's completely in his element now. This is what he does best, cutting through the noise and saying what everyone's thinking. We live in a world where everyone wants to be heard, but nobody wants to be challenged. Everyone wants a platform, but they only want it if people are going to applaud. Well, that's not reality. Reality is messy. Reality is someone disagreeing with you. Reality is having to defend your positions with something more than just outrage. The audience is hanging on every word. And when you can't do that, when you resort to name-calling and storming off, you're not standing up for yourself. You're proving that you don't actually have a leg to stand on." Bill pauses, lets that sink in. "So yeah, that just happened. And you know what? I don't regret a single question I asked. Because they were fair questions. They were questions that needed to be asked. And if she couldn't answer them, that's on her, not on me." The applause builds again, louder this time. Bill glances at his notes, then back up at the camera. "We've got a great show tonight. When we come back, we'll talk about something else. Anything else, because I think we've all had enough drama for one evening." The audience laughs, the tension finally breaking completely. But before we go to break, I just want to say one more thing. Bill's expression gets serious. If you come on this show, come prepared. Come ready to back up what you say. Come ready to have an actual conversation, not a therapy session. And if you can't do that, maybe just stay home. The camera holds on him for another moment, and you can see it in his eyes. He meant every word. This wasn't about being mean. This wasn't about humiliating anyone. This was about holding someone accountable for their own words, their own actions. And sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen. The lights dim as they cut to commercial, but the energy in that studio is electric. Everyone knows they just witnessed something extraordinary, something that will be talked about for days, weeks, maybe longer. Because this wasn't just a celebrity meltdown. This was a perfect example of what happens when someone who's used to being agreed with runs into someone who refuses to play that game. It was a collision of egos, sure, but more than that, it was a collision of expectations and reality. Bill expected a conversation. Meghan expected validation. And when those two things met, the result was explosive. The cameras are off now, but you can still feel the buzz in the air. The audience members are talking among themselves, replaying what they just saw, trying to process it all. The crew is moving around, resetting for the next segment, but they're talking too. Everyone has an opinion, because that's what moments like this do. They force you to pick a side. They force you to think about who was right, who was wrong, what should have been said, what shouldn't have been said. And in this case, the lines are pretty clear. One person came ready to have a real conversation, tough as it might be. The other person came expecting to be treated like royalty, literally. And when that didn't happen, they couldn't cope. Bill sits at his desk during the commercial break, taking a sip of water. Someone from the crew asks if he's okay, and he just nods. He's fine. He's more than fine, because he did what he always does. He asked the questions that needed to be asked, and he didn't back down when things got uncomfortable. That's the job. That's what he signed up for. And if someone can't handle it, that's their problem, not his. The commercial break ends, the lights come back up, and Bill moves on to the next segment like nothing happened. Because in his world, this is just another night, another guest who couldn't handle the heat, another example of someone mistaking their platform for immunity. But for everyone watching, this is more than just another night. This is the night they saw someone completely lose control on live television. This is the night they saw the mask slip, the careful image crack wide open, and that's what makes it so compelling. Not the yelling, not the insults, but the raw honesty of it all. The moment when someone reveals exactly who they are when they're not getting their way. Bill wraps up the show an hour later, says goodnight to the audience, and the cameras go dark. The studio empties out slowly, people still buzzing about what happened. It'll be online within minutes. It'll be trending within the hour. Everyone will have an opinion. But in that studio, in that moment, there was only one truth. One person kept their cool and asked fair questions. The other person lost it completely. And sometimes, that's all you need to know. The stage is empty now. The chairs sit vacant under the harsh studio lights. But the ghost of what happened hangs in the air, thick and heavy. Because moments like this don't just disappear. They linger. They stick with you. This wasn't supposed to be a hostile interview. It was supposed to be a conversation. But somewhere between the first question and the explosive exit, something went terribly wrong. Or maybe, just maybe, something went exactly right. Because sometimes people need to be challenged. Sometimes they need to hear that their version of events isn't the only version. Sometimes they need to understand that being famous doesn't mean being right. And when they can't accept that, when they lash out instead of engaging, they show everyone exactly who they really are. Bill understood that. He's been doing this long enough to know when someone is genuine and when someone is performing. And tonight, he called out the performance. He refused to play along with the script that had been written in advance, the one where he was supposed to nod sympathetically and agree with everything. That's not his job. His job is to question, to probe, to push back when something doesn't make sense. And he did that job perfectly. The guest, on the other hand, didn't do their job. Their job was to be prepared, to be honest, to be willing to defend their positions. Instead, they crumbled under the lightest scrutiny. They turned a difficult conversation into a personal attack. They made themselves the victim in a situation where they were simply being held accountable. And that's the real story here. Not the exit, not the yelling, but the complete inability to handle criticism. The absolute certainty that any disagreement must be an attack. The refusal to engage with ideas that challenge the carefully constructed narrative. It's a pattern that's become all too common. People want platforms, but they don't want accountability. They want to speak, but they don't want to be questioned. They want attention, but only the positive kind. And when reality intrudes, when someone dares to ask them to back up their claims, they fall apart. That's what happened tonight. A simple interview turned into a spectacle because one person couldn't handle being treated like everyone else. Because one person expected special treatment and threw a fit when they didn't get it. The audience knew it. You could see it in their faces, hear it in their reactions. They weren't watching a host bully a guest. They were watching a guest bully themselves, destroying their own credibility with every defensive response, every personal attack, every refusal to engage with the actual substance of the questions. Bill gave them every opportunity to turn it around. He asked fair questions, he listened to the answers, and when those answers didn't hold up to scrutiny, he pointed that out. That's not cruelty, that's conversation. But for someone who's used to interviews where every question is lobbed like a softball, where every answer is met with nodding agreement, this must have felt like an ambush. It must have felt unfair. Except it wasn't. It was just honest. And honesty, apparently, is something that not everyone can handle. The studio is quiet now. The lights are dimming. The cameras are being packed away. But the impact of what happened tonight will last much longer than this one episode. Because people saw something real. They saw someone crack under pressure. They saw the difference between someone who can defend their positions and someone who can only defend their ego. They saw what happens when entitlement meets accountability, and they won't forget it anytime soon. The chairs sit empty, the stage is bare, but the echo of raised voices still seems to hang in the air, a reminder of the moment when everything went sideways. One person walked away with their dignity intact. The other person walked away at all, and that tells you everything you need to know. This was always going to be a tough conversation, but it didn't have to be a disaster. It only became a disaster when one person decided that they were above being questioned, above having to explain themselves, above the basic rules of discourse that apply to everyone else. And when you make that decision, when you put yourself above the conversation itself, you lose. Not because the other person beat you, but because you beat yourself. Bill knew that. He's seen it happen before, and he'll see it happen again. But each time it happens, it's a reminder of an important truth. You can't control how people react to you. You can only control how you react to them. Bill stayed calm. He stayed rational. He stayed focused on the questions that mattered. And in doing so, he won without even trying. The other person lost their temper. They lost their composure. They lost the argument before it even really began. And that loss was entirely self-inflicted. The audience knew it. The crew knew it. Anyone watching at home knew it. The only person who didn't seem to know it was the person doing the losing. And maybe that's the saddest part of all. The complete lack of self-awareness. The inability to see how badly things were going, to pull back, to reset, to try again. Instead, there was just escalation, just anger, just the desperate flailing of someone who knows they're drowning but refuses to grab the life preserver. Bill threw that preserver multiple times. He gave multiple chances to step back, to answer the questions properly, to have the intelligent conversation that was promised at the start. But those chances were rejected. And once they were rejected, there was nothing left but the inevitable conclusion. A dramatic exit, a burned bridge, a moment that will define how people see that person for a long time to come. Because that's what happens when you lose control on camera. It becomes part of your story. It becomes how people remember you. Bill will be remembered for staying calm, for asking the right questions, for not backing down. The guest will be remembered for losing it, for throwing insults, for running away. Those are the roles they chose for themselves in those crucial minutes. And those are the roles they'll be stuck with. The empty studio seems almost peaceful now. The chaos has passed. The storm has moved on. But the damage remains. Not to the show. The show will be fine. Better than fine, probably. Controversy drives ratings, and this was certainly controversial. But to the person who walked out, the damage might be permanent, because you can't undo moments like this. You can't take back words spoken in anger. You can't erase the image of yourself melting down on national television. You can only live with it, and try to do better next time, if there is a next time. Because after a performance like that, people might think twice before extending another invitation. The lights go out completely now. The studio is dark and silent, but somewhere, somehow, this moment is already spreading, already being dissected, already becoming part of the cultural conversation. And when people talk about it tomorrow, next week, next month, they'll remember one simple truth. Some people can handle the spotlight, and some people just think they can. Tonight, we all learned the difference.